Everyone thinks they want to be a social media influencer these days. And why not? Your online persona has further reach than ever before. Much more than your real life ever could, right? So it's no wonder so many people want to have a strong presence in this digital world. But why? Is it purely narcissistic? Or is there a bigger purpose? When developing a following, what content are you creating? Is it gratuitous or genuine? Is it sexy or somewhat serious? Is there a method behind the madness? Jeremy Segal is taking social networking to the next level. But you wouldn't know it at first glance. Jeremy has a very unassuming presence. A natural introvert, you wouldn't necessarily think of Jeremy as a social media icon. But his Why Influence podcast has a cult-like following. He attracts both established and up-and-coming influencers in his virtual meetup, the Association of Influencers and Thought Leaders. When you can influence the influencers, you know you're doing something right. And Jeremy is doing a lot of things right. Learning and sharing the secrets of top YouTubers and social media thought leaders, he provides lessons and strategies that anyone can implement. Jeremy will teach you how to grow your audience, create content, and navigate the world of social media in a more meaningful way. If you've ever wanted to make a difference, impact the world, or just grow your tribe, you won't want to miss my in-depth conversation with Jeremy Segal. This episode is brought to you by Atlantic Custom Group. For all your home repair and improvement needs, Atlantic Custom Group specializes in the unique and inspiring. From custom libraries and millwork to tree houses and off-grid structures, Atlantic Custom Group can do it all. Renovate your kitchen, remodel your basement, or reinvent your entire home with Atlantic Custom Group. Call now for an appointment, 770-827-7591. Atlantic Custom Group is the official sponsor for the Extraordinary Podcast. This is the Extraordinary Podcast, and my guest today is Jeremy Segal.
Thanks for having me, Nate. I'm excited.
How's it going, man?
Doing great.
We are virtual, but we're in the same town.
Yeah, down the street.
Yeah, right. Good old A-Town, Atlanta. For those who don't know Jeremy, we've got the Why Influence podcast, and we have the weekly influencer meetup that has absolutely changed the game for me and for this podcast. Tell everybody about your podcast and about this amazing community that you've started to develop.
Yeah, thanks so much. So the podcast, it's Why Influence, WHY Influence. You can just type it in or go to .com. What I'm doing is I'm interviewing influencers about why they're sharing. So I'm deep diving into why they started, why they're still sharing, what kind of barriers they had to overcome to share in such big ways, like how they're making a living, as most of them are full-time influencers. So like what kind of income sources are they having? So just all around, just like, why are you an influencer? Why are you sharing? And how did you grow into the person that you're able to share in big ways? Because it's something that I always struggled with. I never really understood why people shared online. I never did until I started my podcast. And I've had a lot of amazing guests. I've had YouTubers with over 1 million subscribers, Instagrammers with over 1 million followers, just like some awesome people that I've been able to drill into. And then the community, which has been awesome having you there, Nate. We meet every Thursday, and we are just like a group of influencers and aspiring influencers. So even if you're not sharing, there's some people in there learning from each other, and I bring in guest speakers. So then different people share what they're actually doing today that's working for them. And then there's networking, so we can try to build a community and to do some collaborations potentially. And I've seen a lot of introductions happen as a result. So I've been doing that consistently for about 7 months now. Yeah, a little over 7 months every week. We've been doing it. And last week was our biggest week. We had 47 people attend, which was awesome. And I'm looking forward to seeing that grow.
Yeah, that group has grown by leaps and bounds. It seems like every week there's new people to network with. That's been one of the most rewarding aspects for me. A lot of these weekly calls and a lot of these consistent reoccurring meetings that we have out there, you tend to have a lot of the same group, a lot of the same people. So after a while, you've networked with all of those people. You kind of know them. Those are kind of in your circle now. But with this call, every single week. I don't think there has been a week to go by that I haven't met someone completely new that I knew nothing about. And it was another new connection. And again, a huge reward from being a part of that. And it seems like that call was created as a result of the amazing podcast and the cool guests that you're getting there. But it was really a result of this situation that we're in. Like when you first started this was a in-person meetup. So let's talk a little bit about how this has morphed into what it is today.
Yeah, sure. You do podcasting, and most podcasters know how quiet it is as a podcaster. Like you could have a lot of downloads, a lot of people listening in, but it's really hard to like hear from the people on the other side. Like there's nowhere for them to leave a comment while they listen to the episode. If they want to send you a message and say, hey, that was a great episode, they literally have to go to your website and go to your contact form or find you on Instagram or private message you somewhere. It's really inconvenient. So I found that, even though I was getting downloads of my podcast, it was pretty quiet. And I was lacking that feeling of community that sort of goes along with sharing. A big part of my podcast is self-development related. I've had to overcome a lot of barriers to be sharing at the level that I'm currently sharing. And a stepping stone for me was to start building a community, because I was very uncomfortable with doing that. Like I was very uncomfortable having to facilitate a group. And even like, as we started growing, like I remember having a meetup where only one person showed up. Like it just takes a while to build a group. But then now, 47 people on a call, like I could never imagine myself facilitating a meeting with that many people looking at me while I'm talking. So it's been like a growth opportunity for me. And that's a big reason why I'm doing the podcast. Like that's the primary reason really, is self-development and surrounding myself by people who are better than me at what it is I'm trying to get better at, which is a combination of authenticity, vulnerability, and just like being comfortable sharing in big ways. So it's just like another way for me to push myself to keep growing in that direction.
Well, I think that's one of that's the appeal of a lot of podcasters, and you in particular, is as a somebody on the outside looking in, I sense that uncomfortableness. I sense that vulnerability that this isn't natural for you. You're not like me, who's this loud talker who has no problem, blah, 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 all the time kind of thing. Like, so to watch someone explore themselves and explore those aspects of their life that don't necessarily come natural, it's really inspiring. So what was it about, or what was the catalyst to get you over that hump? How did all this get started? Because it's not natural. It doesn't feel comfortable. So how did you get out of that comfort zone and dive into this?
Yeah, it's definitely a journey. The whole premise of the podcast is called Why Influence. And I think, it comes up a lot in interviews, even organically, that you need a powerful why to overcome the barriers. And so like you need a powerful why to get started. You need a powerful why to be able to continue sharing, because it's a lot of work. And just the why is just so important. And for me, like it took me a long time to figure out why it matters to be doing that. And I guess it can go back about 8 years. When I first met my wife, at the time girlfriend, the first gift she gave me was a check to join Toastmasters. So if that gives you any indication of like how I was as a communicator,
or what an amazing woman your wife is.
Who
does that?
Yeah. Yes. So I held on to that check for over 4 years. I was like, I'm not gonna cash this check unless I actually use it for its purpose. So I kept it. And 4 years later, I finally cashed the check. And the same time I joined Toastmasters was the same time I joined 2 mastermind groups. And it was the combination of those that helped me get comfortable speaking in front of small groups, as well as get opportunities to talk to other entrepreneurs, because I have an entrepreneur background, and help them take leaps in mindsets very quickly. So I got to see the value and the power of my voice in the mastermind groups. And then I got to get comfortable speaking in the Toastmasters. And the combination of those sort of made me realize, I moved out of state from where I grew up. I don't really talk to anybody, on the phone, rarely text. Usually you only have access to me if you're one-on-one in person. like if you're not in front of me in person, like you're not getting my knowledge and wisdom. So I started to realize that nobody really had access to all the knowledge that I've accumulated over my lifetime. So I've got all this like hidden knowledge essentially. So then I started reflecting more on that, and I was like, well, you know, a lot of people out there aren't sharing their hidden knowledge. So I'm struggling to share mine, and I have to overcome my barriers to get it out there in a bigger way. So I want to try to self-develop myself so I can, and why not share that journey so that I can help other people overcome their barriers so that they can start sharing their hidden knowledge. And what better way to make like a positive impact on the world than to like help other people make a bigger positive impact in whatever it is that they're passionate about. So that's sort of what got me started and gave me a powerful enough why to start, was like the combination of the self-development as well as like the impact of what it is that I'm sharing.
Yeah, I think we all have something to offer. So I'm curious, what is one of those little hidden nuggets that of knowledge that you have that you feel like you want to share with the world?
I mean, there's a lot I've learned through the podcast journey, but just some of my experiences. Like
or maybe one of your experiences before you got into podcasting that you felt like was knowledge that you wanted to share.
Yeah. So I always wanted to be an entrepreneur, and I always wanted to be a CFO of a company because I saw that as being the skill set necessary to be a good entrepreneur. So I was very laser focused from a young age, and I had always had an entrepreneurial mindset. Like even as far back as middle school, I was like taking pictures of stuff on the shelves of Walmart and listing on eBay and doing like early day drop shipping. And when things sold, I would have my parents drive me to Walmart so I could buy it, so then I can go ship it.
Nice.
Just like that's like the mindset that I had. So I'd started a lot of little businesses, e-commerce stores, brands, but never went big with it because I didn't give myself permission to be an entrepreneur yet. And then when I was 25 years old, I got an opportunity to be a CFO of a 130 employee company that did about 25 million a year in revenue. And it just gave me direct reports. It like gave me a ton of experience really quickly. And finally, I was like, okay, let me give myself permission to be an entrepreneur now. So I went full-time entrepreneur after that. And I started a business, built it up, and sold it in a 2-year period. So
that was not the car business. What business was that?
It was an e-commerce drone accessory business.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, back when the DJI Phantom 1 came out, I was selling accessories and making FPV kits for those. And built it up from zero to, and you want like 2 years of financial histories that are clean to have a sellable business. So exactly at 2 years, I put it up for sale and I sold it within 30 days. So as fast as you could possibly go through the starting and selling of a business, I did that.
You're officially an entrepreneur at that point.
Yeah, I was an entrepreneur. And that's another catalyst that happened is like, I got lost for a while because I was like, I'm not super rich right now. Like, it's not like I can't work for the rest of my life, but I know I can be an entrepreneur
for a minute.
Yeah, I know I can be an entrepreneur for the rest of my life. But like, what's my why now? Like my why was so focused before, and I was lost for a while. And eventually, that's when I gave myself permission to have a voice. So like the second time of like a big permission giving, and that's like how I got there. So there's a whole entrepreneur, I guess, knowledge base that I have that I would like to help people with, and I'm sort of applying it to what I'm doing now, but I still think I'm overcoming a lot of barriers, and I think it'll sort of trickle back in some capacity.
You say that you give yourself permission to do things quite a bit. Where does that come from? What's that all about?
I think you can't really fully commit to something unless you let yourself fully commit to something. And if you don't let yourself fully commit to it, you're going to be holding yourself back. So I found that if you give yourself permission to do something, then there's no reason to hold back and you can go all in. So that's sort of how I treat it. Like, I started several things entrepreneurially before and even as being a CFO, but I never gave myself permission. So I never was actually an entrepreneur in my eyes. Like I was just like someone just doing like little side hustles every once in a while. And similar with the podcast, like I never gave myself permission to have a voice. Like I never posted online. Like before doing my podcast or posting my first podcast episode live, my last time sharing online was 7 months prior in Facebook. And it had one comment from his friend saying, "Dang, you're still on Facebook?" So I was like non-existent, online.
Talk about complete 180, right? Now you're having to completely put yourself out there. That's been one of the toughest struggles for me too, because I don't necessarily have a problem with putting myself out there, but I'm just from an old school generation. So it's like, I'm just this old guy in the young guy's world, and it's just, I feel incredibly out of place for sure, trying to live in this digital marketing world that we're in. But I wanted to circle back around to, you talked about two things that impacted your life significantly, or your process significantly, is the masterminds and the Toastmasters. And I think Toastmasters is probably one of the most underrated tools available or resources out there for people. So tell folks who don't know about Toastmasters at all, which I hope that's not the case for many, but for those who don't know about Toastmasters, explain what it is and explain the value and the benefit that you got from that experience.
Yeah, Toastmasters, it's a nonprofit organization. They've got local chapters literally everywhere around the world. There's probably one down the street from you, wherever you're at right now. And usually they meet once a week, but it varies based on chapter. So when I joined, I went to a couple in the area at different times that were convenient for me, picked the one that I liked the best, and just started being consistent.
Plug your group.
We're in Dunwoody in Atlanta, so we meet Fridays at 7 a.m.
No, but what's the name of it though, so people can find it if they want to?
Dunwoody Toastmasters.
Oh, I thought it was a different name. I thought it was I had written it down somewhere. Maybe it was a different group, Toastmaster group. But from our last call, I had written it down so I could join that one particularly.
Okay,
because there are groups everywhere, and there is definitely one near you. However, doing some exploration, not some groups are certainly better than others. And unfortunately, the ones that were geographically close to me were not very strong groups. So I was looking for one that was a little bit further out. That was a little bit. Well, I didn't care where it was. I just wanted to have a little bit of a stronger group to work with.
It's important to shop around before picking it for sure. And it's just a really supportive community. So even when I first went there, like they always ask the guests, like, hey, can you introduce yourself and tell us how you found the club? Like I started having anxiety right away. Like I'm not used to talking to a group of 20 people. So like it gives you opportunities to share in front of a group. Every meeting they assign roles. So each person has a different role. So you're always having an opportunity to speak up, whether you're keeping track of things or running the meeting, or you're participating in the meeting. They do things like table topics, where they'll go up there and they pick a random topic and then they call on a random person, and on the spot you got to walk up there and talk for at least a minute on that. And so it's like good for catching you off guard, putting you in your uncomfort zone, as well as like getting opportunities to speak. And when you speak, people write on a piece of paper and send you feedback. So you get feedback from everyone in the group, as well as one person is assigned as your evaluator, and then they get a speaking opportunity, which their speaking opportunity is the talk on how you did, so they can get feedback on you. So it's just a good way to get like positive encouragement and constructive criticism in like a safe environment.
That's so helpful, right? Well, and one of the things that I missed right out of the gate that I think is really cool about it is it gets you comfortable being in leadership roles out there in the front, if you will. Like even the timekeepers and even the administrative duties that you get assigned through the course of a meeting or whatever, it's still providing you an opportunity to speak and to share and to to let people know, hey, look, you're on your time. You got to, it's a responsibility. So it's just one little step of, okay, well, I'm having to be vocal. I'm having to vocalize myself. Whereas if I'm quiet and shy, it allows me to do that without, I'm not giving a speech. I'm just telling you got 5 minutes. You got to start, or 30 seconds left. You got to wrap it up. It's a way to just get you out of that eggshell just a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. And it's a slow process. I mean, I was super nervous on my first several talks. And all I did is focus on trying to be comfortable. Like they give you a manual and you can follow what like the steps it says and like what you should focus on. Like sometimes you should be like more dynamic or maybe focus on eye contact, and they have like this curriculum for you. And most of the time in the beginning, all I did is just try to not forget what I was going to say and just be comfortable. And that was the main thing I was shooting for.
Just not see me sweating, right? Just don't notice the drips coming down my face.
Yeah.
Don't screw up. That's usually how I'm walking into them. But now the other part of it that I do like as well is, and again, it's that transition to making it easier. It's when you get to critique another speech, because number one, it's easy to talk about trying to help someone. So it makes you comfortable sharing your opinion. And at the same time, you're evaluating techniques and things that they're doing that's going to automatically seep into your knowledge, into how you speak. And then you're providing good, helpful, constructive feedback in the same process. So it's like a win, 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 win situation.
Yeah, it's a great organization, and if you're trying to get more confidence or overcome barriers to speaking in front of groups, whether it's for what it is that you're working on or just in general in life, it's definitely valuable. I've seen so many people in my group grow so much, and I've personally grown tremendously. I wouldn't have done my podcast if I wasn't part of Toastmasters first.
That's cool. Well, yeah, and the skills that you get from Toastmasters apply to every job. It's not a class for public speakers to become the best public speakers. It's a class
Right.
for everyone to become better at sharing knowledge.
Yeah, and if you want to become like a public speaker that's like on keynotes and on stages, there's another organization called National Speaker Association, and that's like something that you may want to be part of. But
Great point. Great point. And that's how you would potentially get more speaking opportunities as well through that organization. They're a great group.
Yeah.
So we talked about that aspect of it, but you also brought up masterminds, and I'm very interested in masterminds, but I have, the concept I love of masterminds, but unfortunately over these, particularly the last 5 years or so, you've seen a ton of these things show up, and a lot of them that don't have the value that the concept started at. So tell me about the ones that you're involved in, and what you've benefited from that as opposed to like a Toastmasters.
Yeah. Well, I was part of two. COVID sort of shut them down, and they haven't really been reborn yet. But there's one that was more geared towards like tended to have more like entry level entrepreneurs that showed up. So I was able to really give a ton of value in that one. Like I could help people, like they would say their issues and I could come up with solutions. And I was like, getting more comfortable speaking up and giving that feedback to help them and find and communicate in ways that sort of hold them accountable. It's like just giving them value and helping them take the leap in mindset that they need to accomplish the goals that they're trying to do. The other one that I went to was more for learning, I guess. Like there was a lot of people in there who were very knowledgeable on internet marketing, and like I had spoken there twice, so it gave me an opportunity to sort of guest speak to a small intimate group in like a private setting. So those were my first two sort of like talks outside Toastmasters, were to this one mastermind group, and I just sort of shared my journey and like how I'm doing things from an entrepreneur standpoint to try to share like my thought process, and maybe it can be helpful for them, which is sort of how we handled the meeting. Like every meeting, somebody would guest speak and share what they're working on and how they're thinking through their stuff. So in there, like it's harder for me to like help people as much just because there's so many smart people in the room, and I learned a lot. But I would say the other one definitely attributed more towards me overcoming the barriers to figuring out that it mattered that I was sharing. And actually the other one did too, because I would share my journey and I would struggle to articulate, what it is, like the knack that I had. They're like, you started this and you did this and you did this. Like, how did you do it? Like, how can you come up with a business idea in a weekend and have something that's successful? Like, just doesn't make sense. Like, what's that process? So they would drill me on like what I presented on, and so I could be like, oh, well, maybe that's what I need to focus on next time I speak, is more of my thought process as opposed to like the accomplishments or what I'm actually working on right now. So it was a growing experience there too.
Isn't it funny how that works? Like what you perceive as valuable in your mind, and then what they're actually taking away from it can a lot of times be a lot different.
Yeah.
Or what you think is where you find value versus where they're finding value in what you're saying. It's really interesting how that works. So what was the biggest what was the biggest value that you took away from of those two masterminds? What was the biggest takeaway for you personally?
I would say probably just opportunities to share in a way that like I have, that's in my skill set. Like as opposed to like Toastmasters, I can just talk about anything. I can talk about the day I'm having or something.
Right.
But they're like, I can talk about like internet marketing. So for my business, I've grown over 200,000 social followers. So I can explain like this is how I did it, and it's with a room of people who are mostly better than me at what I did. So then, I can maybe even get some feedback from it, but also share something that I learned that maybe they didn't know. So I think just it's just discovering that my voice mattered. That was definitely the biggest takeaway for me from those.
Interesting. So for someone like me who's trying to find that right mastermind, just like you're trying to find that right Toastmasters group, there's some that are better than others. Any advice for me on finding that right mastermind or the best one?
Not really. I mean, masterminds vary significantly.
How did you find yours?
The one with the high level marketing people that was invite only, and I had a friend that sort of brought me along with him when he got invited, and then he stopped going, and I just sort of stayed. So it was like an invite stumbled into kind of thing. And then the other one I found, I think it's on meetup.com. It's at the Tech Village. They have a mastermind once a month, and so I just found it there and started going. So they're free masterminds.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so you got to be careful because masterminds can get very expensive. But I was just in free ones. Like these were free.
Well, so that was you kind of blew my next question out of the water. So that was my follow up. Was a lot of these masterminds can be very expensive, and I wanted to know based on the cost, which I guess in this case was free, so they were valuable. Was it worth it? Was the value there? Because I know Toastmasters. Hey, Toastmasters is cheap and it requires a lot of work, and I know that there's significant value, bang for your buck, if you will.
Yeah,
huge. Do you feel like the return on investment is there? I guess would be my question.
Yeah, for the $0 that I spent, I got a ton of value. Yeah.
But what about that one that cost 10 grand?
Yeah, I don't know if I had the money for that one, but there were in the one that was invite only, there was a guy in there that said he's been to a ton of masterminds. Like now he's involved in like Tony Robbins' circle.
The elite mastermind of masterminds.
Yeah. So he's been to masterminds for him, for Dean Graziosi, and some other big people. And he said that like this mastermind was like on par or better than those really expensive paid ones. So it's not always about what you spend; it's about the people you're around, really.
Again, it's just like the Toastmasters. It's about finding that right group. Well, if it's cool with you, we'll put a link to those groups in the show notes for those that are interested. I love being able to provide free resources to folks. That's a big deal for us on the show. So through this podcasting journey and through this becoming an influencer experience, what has been the biggest takeaway for you personally? Because I know this has been a lot of us on this path. It's all about personal growth and personal development and becoming a better version of ourselves. What's been the biggest thing for you down this journey?
For me, it's definitely been a combination of the self-development and surrounding myself with just amazing people. Like I now have this like friend circle, people like you, Nate, that I've been introduced to as a result of going down this journey. Like if I didn't start my podcast or didn't start self-developing to doing these communities, like me and you may not have had this like more intimate relationship. So it's definitely opened doors to, build relationships with people that I would like to build relationships with. So I've got like sort of a new friend circle that's been created from it. And I've self-developed tremendously already. And there's so much more growth to be had moving forward. So I'm looking forward to that and can continue challenging myself. But I feel good about like the self-development and the friend circle that sort of has come out of it for sure.
Yeah, well, what's cool is we have so much further to go. It's like I feel like we're just hitting the tip of the iceberg, and there's a group of us. We were talking about this before we started recording that are kind of all in this stage in the game, if you will, and I see, and I've got this thing where I can, and I don't know what it is or whatever, but like I can see somebody's future, like what their world is going to look like 5 and 10 years from now. And when I see you and Pablo and Isar and some of these guys and myself, for what it's worth, I see it happening for me too.
Yeah, you're doing great.
It's not about, I see you on a stage. I see you guys as influencers. I see the impact that you're making now. And I just think, man, imagine what it's going to be like 5 or 10 years from now. Like just to watch the trajectory, and that's what it is. I look at it like a jet taking off, it's like, It's just really about to,
Yeah.
I'm excited. It's very cool.
Well, speaking on that, I got one comment there. So I got my first speaking opportunity to talk at a podcast conference. And before that, like I've talked to my Toastmasters group, which is maybe at most 20 people. And then the mastermind group with maybe like 15 at max. And the speaking event that I did had over 400 people in the room. So it's my first time on stage and in front of such a big audience. Like I was freaking out. Like it was a 5-minute talk, but it was very intense because the slides automatically moved every 15 seconds. So you have like this premeditated setup.
So you got to stay on point.
Yeah. Apparently I found out later, like that's the worst talk to do first because it's very stressful and difficult.
Sure. Absolutely.
So like I pushed myself to do it and I did it. I was extremely nervous when I got off. My hand was shaking. I texted my wife and you couldn't even see what I typed. It was just a bunch of random letters. And
because you were so nervous. That's awesome.
Yeah. But what was cool about it is the day after, one of the ladies that was in the room saw me in the conference hall. She came up to me and was like, "Hey, I saw you talk yesterday. And I'm extremely nervous about speaking on stages. But after seeing you talk, I've challenged myself to apply next year to speak on stage. And I'm extremely uncomfortable making that commitment. But I'm telling you that now." So actually, I pulled out my phone on the moment. I was like, "Can you say that again? Say that again. I'll hold you to it." And she got really uncomfortable again. But it was awesome. It was like an unintended consequence that came from that. And that was like my first big time of hearing some kind of impact that I've had.
You completely stole my thunder. So my next question was going to be about how we get to share these experiences. And one of the most rewarding thing is like seeing like we get outside of our comfort zone and we hate it, but then we get rewarded for it by this feedback loop. These people that come back and say, "Hey, this had an impact on me. I listened to this podcast and made a difference," or whatever. And so that was going to be my question. Share an experience about when that's impacted. You said, no, you just completely answered it beautifully. It's just amazing. Like how you are rewarded for putting yourself out there. It happens time and time again. It's so everyone hates doing it and nobody wants to do it, but you're rewarded every time for it, man.
Yeah. And I ask that question all the time on my podcast to the people that I bring on. And it is not uncommon for these influencers that have these large communities to say like, someone messaged me and said that I saved their life. Like they were going to kill themselves and they heard this or saw this. And as a result of that, decided not to. And when you start hearing messages like that, even just once, but then like on a recurring basis, you're going to like feel like, oh, well, I have to keep going. Like I have to look out for these people. And your why just keeps getting stronger and stronger when you start hearing those messages like that.
It's why I've become addicted to podcasting. It's not just a job now at this point. It's like an addiction because it's like, I seek that. Like to me, that's it. That's the reward. That's the name of the game. When you can get that, it's like, it's a selfish thing for me. I do that because it makes me feel good about me. It's like, versus what you see so much in the world. It's like, I just believe that what you put out there, you get back. And when you're putting out a lot of negativity, whether it be about politics or state of the world or whatever, then you get a lot of that negativity back. But when you're putting out a lot of good, like you're doing, all that karma, man, it comes full circle. It really does.
Yeah. So just real quick shout out to your listeners. If you've been listening to Nate for a while now, I'd say at least for 3 episodes that he's done, and you haven't sent him a message or a private message or anything, like just take a moment after this podcast and just like send him a message. Cause I've got a podcast and I know how rare it is to hear from, you can have like a certain size community and only a certain percentage you hear from. It's a very small number. So like just send him a quick thank you and maybe like something that you've gotten out of this podcast. Cause it's hard to hear that. And I just want to give a shout out to Nate because he's doing an awesome job here. He's giving all this for you for free. So
that's awesome, man. Thank you for that. I like it when they tell me I suck. Like just tell me something. Like just
tell me
whatever.
sucks too.
whenever I ask somebody to do an iTunes review, it's always that premise. Well, I got to say something good about it. I'm like, dude, you can say something good, bad, or ugly. Just put it in there, man. I just want to see something, just let me see that it's in there. Show me you're listening. You can tell me I suck. Just prove it by showing me that you're listening. If
Right.
you can tell me I suck at this, and this, that proves to me that you actually listened to what I had to say. So it's very rewarding for sure. And it is. It's such a, and for what it's worth, I mean, like, again, I've been blessed by getting some feedback in that realm, and when you do, it's really incredible, really, really neat thing. So here's a question I stole from Pablo in an interview that I just recently listened to on one of his podcasts. I'm curious for you, because you've been going through all this growth and personal development. What's an area where you had a pretty fixed mindset or a pretty fixed opinion about, or philosophy on, or whatever, that now through this journey has changed tremendously? Like, say, like you had a very, and it's hard for me to describe it specifically, but maybe that'll be enough for you to work with.
Yeah, and it's something that comes up a lot in my interviews too, because I ask for advice. But it's something I experience as well. Is people don't want perfect; they want authentic. And if you put all this energy into making something perfect, it's not going to sound authentic, and then it's just not going to resonate as well and be as true to you, or it may sound so perfect that the listener can't relate to it. So I think that in the early days, like, I mean, the first 3 podcasts I did, I literally re-recorded myself asking each question and posted.
I remember you talking about that. I was just listening to you sharing that with Chris.
Yeah.
Was it Chris you were sharing that with? I think
yeah,
it was. Yeah.
And it's because I was so uncomfortable sharing, and I felt like I was just stumbling through the questions. It ended up being a good exercise to help me figure out like how I want to sound, and it's good to do. But I'm glad I gave myself a cap of doing it for 3. But,
all right.
But like, if you try
It'd
to
be
think,
a lot of work after 3. Gets tedious.
But if you think about how much work it would be to keep that going, like, you would never put content out. So then, that's one thing. But then the other is like, you're not going to sound authentic. People aren't going to hear who you really are, and then you're not going to build that deeper relationship that might be what is needed to have that person or listener to stick around. So it's definitely important to focus on authenticity and not be so perfect.
Yeah. Well, I like Chris Kremetzos is the founder of Podfest and a friend of both you and I, and guest on our shows. And he talks about just starting ugly. And I think it's so important that you do start ugly and then you get better. Like, just starting creates the feedback loop right there. And you start to, again, like it becomes too much work to record all those questions over and over again. So like, all right, I'm going to say these questions right, just so I can make it easier on myself, just so I can make the process simpler. And that's been the case for me. It's like, I hate editing. I love doing the podcast, but my least favorite process of this whole thing is going through the edit and the editing process. So it's been a goal for me to give the absolute best interview that I can give, so I don't have to edit as much.
Right.
And I've actually you've inspired me with your Facebook Lives and doing these interviews in a live format like that. Man, that's pressure. That's, I've gotten to rely on that editing process to make me sound a lot better than I am. But like with you, me putting it out there live, that's been a huge inspiration to me to be like, okay, man, it's, the light's on, you're go, see what you got.
Even like feeling like if something happens, or like I've had it like maybe 1 or twice that like a disconnection happens, or the guest's camera goes out, he has to change the battery or something. Like, you have to like handle that on the situation live.
That Bill O'Reilly moment. We'll do it live, man. We're just gonna do it live. Come on. Filling time and doing whatever you got to do to make it flow and make it work.
And I didn't go live until it was actually a challenge a friend made to me. He's like, after you do 30 interviews, you got to do a live stream update where you get a friend who interviews you live. So it was the first time I went live on Facebook with a whole community of people that I'd never shared with, and I had a friend interviewing me on my podcast journey. So it's definitely, and then since then I've done live stream interviews since. So I've done.
I was gonna say, you've got a couple of those where those update episodes where you keep everybody in the loop. Yeah.
So I've done more live streams now than not live streams at this point.
So is that what you think the future is? Do you think that the direction for us as podcasters is going that live stream route?
I think there's the more ways you put stuff out, the better. Because
that's great.
Like for me, like you mentioned, the hardest part's the editing, doing the post-production kind of stuff. So the more the easier it is to put content out, the better. So for me, like I'm not editing out the ums and uhs anymore, and because someone can put that on 1.25x or 1.5x if they want to listen to it faster and overcome some of that slowness that comes from not filling those little gaps.
That's a great point.
And doing a live stream, you're like already getting the content out on YouTube and Facebook if you're multicasting. So then you just have to convert it to audio and then upload it to the podcast. So it's a different workflow for me, but
yeah, it kind of flips the workflow from my perspective, because usually I'm doing it the opposite. I'm getting it up on the podcast and then taking it over to YouTube and social media and all that.
Yeah, that's what I did before. Yeah.
And now you flip that script. So I've got a couple of other questions down that realm I want to go, but before I do, I'm real curious because I'm gonna kind of put you on the spot a little bit. You do a podcast and we're in the same vein, and you've got to hear a little bit of my content. Is there one area or aspect of this podcast that you'd like to see improved upon, or that could be better?
This as in yours, or
as in, yeah, the Extraordinary podcast, not this episode specifically.
Yeah,
better guess, right?
You're getting awesome guess. I wouldn't change anything there.
I was talking about you.
Yeah, except for that one. I would say just the main thing is just to keep going. Like what you're doing is working. You're growing the listener base. You're giving value. You're getting amazing guests. The main thing is just to keep going and not get distracted. Like if you think that like going live is going to be better for you because you can get it to a different workflow, maybe experiment with it and just see. But like what you're doing right now is sort of working, and it's probably better to double down on what's working than it is to sort of spread yourself too thin. So if you don't get many viewers on YouTube, but maybe like you're spending a lot of time editing to get stuff on YouTube, but as an alternative, maybe you could get a second episode of the podcast out. Maybe that's something to consider, because maybe YouTube isn't the right answer because it's not driving anything right now.
Yeah, it's definitely not. I mean, but I guess that was my thought was, okay, go like, what your advice is brilliant. And I need to do a better job of following that, of doubling down on what's working. Cause I tend to want to make sure that it's all working. And YouTube just happens to be one of the areas that I'm not working as well or not having nearly the success. So my thought is, okay, well, let's get that platform firing on all cylinders so that all, but doubling down on what you're talking about makes a lot more sense. I've
interviewed some really big podcasters and even looked up some really big podcasters, like even JLD from Entrepreneur on Fire. Like if you look up his YouTube channel, it's nothing compared to what his podcast gets. So,
right.
If I think it's more advantageous to buckle down on what's working, and even if it's just one platform, and get it really good the way you want it. And then once it's streamlined, then sort of go out in other ways. And you can still, of course, share on Instagram or LinkedIn or on other places if you're seeing good feedback from that. But as far as like what you're doing is working, and I think just keep at it is the main thing, because you're not even that far in your journey. Think 5, 10, 15 years from now, you're going to be much further in your journey. So just the important thing is just to keep going.
Yeah, that's the toughest part for all of us, right? It's like, feel like we're stuck in the mud. We always want the results faster than they ever come. But yeah, to be expected, right? No, that's great advice. I really appreciate that, because that's not what I've been doing. I need to double down more on what is working. So you get amazing guests on your show that have a lot of good advice. So you're able to get a lot of knowledge from them specifically. And Charisma on Demand is a resource I think that is amazing. That would be right in that wheelhouse. I know you could ever get that Charlie Hoopert or Wolpert or whatever.
Yeah, I remember when he had I think I found him when he had 600,000 subscribers on YouTube. I don't know where he's at now, but I think he's well over 1 million.
Yeah, he's really blown up. Well, there's, again, putting out that valuable free content, and it's all in that same realm of particularly Toastmasters. He has a lot of really good advice on building rapport and interviewing and all that kind of stuff. But there's also some mastermind aspects of it as well. But so when you're not interviewing people, where else do you get your knowledge from? Where else are you getting information? Obviously we're all listening to podcasts because we're in that world, but you doing audio books? Do you do regular books? How do you like to consume your content?
Yeah, good question. So lately, the past months, it's really just within my world is where most of it comes from. Like I'm interviewing these amazing people, so I'm learning from those interviews, and then doing these meetups where we have awesome people that we can interact with and uh, sort of learn from each other as well as the guest speakers there that I'm learning from. So like that's probably the majority of my growth is just from that, and in the act of doing that. Um, I would say it's that. Like I don't really read many books. Like I struggle to get through books. It's just not the way that I learn. If there's something I'm trying to immerse myself in or learn, maybe I'll do like a bunch of YouTube content where I'll just learn about something that I'm trying to learn about on YouTube. But that's mostly it. I mean, to be honest, I don't really even listen to podcasts. Like I'll like check
It's
out
hard to
friends.
find the time, right? It's hard to
Yeah.
squeeze them all in.
Like I'll check out people that I meet or my friends. Like I'll poke around every once in a while, but I don't have anything that I'm like a regular to. There's so much content out there to consume. It's hard to keep up. So I'm sort
It's
of just
impossible.
consuming my world and learning and overcoming barriers from what I'm doing and just embracing all that is probably the bulk of where my learning is coming from right now from this standpoint.
Yeah, that's been the toughest thing for me that I continually try to work on is making sure that I'm getting some of that outside content, getting some of those, because like again, like I get all kind of ideas to steal from listening to you and Pablo and some of the good questions to steal from Tim Ferriss. I mean, I've half of my formats based on how he does his stuff. I mean, my last two, or I've quite a few of my questions are all stemmed from interviews that he's done. But I think anytime we can learn from people like that and learn best practices, I think it's going to serve us well.
Yeah.
But it's tough. You're right. I mean, it's so hard there's no way to keep up with all of them for sure. And then it's like just trying to manage
I think it's important, like, especially when you're early in your journey, the hardest part is the start. Obviously, we talked about that. The next hardest part is to continue.
Yeah, right.
And then after that, you just got to experiment and keep tweaking, but you have to keep continuing. So I think it's important to focus more on the early part of your journey, on the taking action part. And then once you're comfortable with staying consistent and sharing and continuing, and you're at that tweaking and testing, experimenting phase, then that's when you can sort of go back to the learning board. Because if you can't stick with it and you can't keep going, then like, what you're just going to keep learning and not applying, and that's a whole slippery slope in itself. So there's a balance you got to play there.
Yeah, I've got a buddy that's struggling with that right now. He's had the opportunity to receive all this knowledge and advice and counseling and idea generation and like how to bring everything to fruition, but that act is he can't take that first step. It's interesting to watch him struggle with just, going from learning to doing. It's really tricky. In this same vein, not everybody is in this to try to be an influencer. We're not all trying to be social media gurus or anything like that, or be influencers. But digital media is just a part of our world now. What would be some advice that you would have for me as a small business owner that's trying to be we're not trying to be social media guys. We're not trying to be influencers, but we are trying to market our product, market our business, and have a presence, be known as an expert in the market for what it is that we do. What would be the advice that you would give for somebody like me trying to get my business out there into the social media world or the digital marketing space?
I would suggest that you make it known that you are doing what you're doing, so that when you are doing like a podcast like this, that your listeners are aware of sort of what you have to offer. Otherwise, they're consuming your content, but maybe not knowing exactly what you're doing or who they can refer to you. So
what if I was a plumber?
If you're a plumber with like sharing online with a podcast?
No, I don't have a podcast. I'm just a plumber, and I want to grow my business.
Yeah, actually, funny story. Yesterday, I had someone come and patch my roof. When he came the first time to give me a quote, there's like a young guy. He's really driven, wants to do a roofing company. He just quit his job as a roofer and trying to start his own business doing it. And I was telling him, like, there's some people I know in that kind of DIY handyman space that are sharing online that are killing it.
Yeah, you
Uh,
do.
so I planted the seed. So then when he came to do the roof, uh, I was like, hey, do you mind just like taking a picture every once in a while? I want to see like the process of what you're doing. And he was like, oh man, I wish I brought my tripod. And I was like, hey, guess what? I got a tripod. You can mount your phone to it. And so then he
Brilliant.
recorded it. And then afterwards, he showed me his phone, and then he's like on the roof. He's talking to the camera, like, this is how you do this. It's a whole DIY. And it's like, now he's got this piece of content that he can put on his website as marketing material. Like, hey, I can fix this roof problem. Here's proof, right? And then he might even grow an audience around it. So it's like the foundation. And that guy literally just did that because he's been pondering it for a long time. And I was just like, encouraging him and sort of enabled it for him. And he did it and took action. So the next step would be like obviously editing and posting that. But yeah, I mean, I think if you're a plumber, document the work that you're doing, and that speaks like so far for sharing that with potential customers, and it can grow into something bigger too.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. That's exactly. Well, it's funny because I come from that realm of home improvement as well, and that's exactly what I've been thinking about. Is like, it's just document it. Should just create the content, and the fact that it is unperfect, like you were talking about before, the fact that it's not polished. I mean, yeah, there are some minor editing that needs to be done, but the fact that it's real and the fact that it's hands-on, that appeals to people these days. That's going to drive business for him.
Yeah, and it's cool that now like I'm on this journey, like I tell him that, and it's like, yeah, he's been pondering it, and then now he took action. It's pretty cool to see like, oh, I just like impacted this guy's life just now. Like he's gonna have like an awesome piece of content to use for marketing to help as a foundation to his business, and he might even join the meetup. So like,
I'd say he better be hiring you as a consultant after all of this, setting
yeah,
you up, or his digital marketer, one of the two, right?
yeah, we'll see.
Well, and that's one of the things I've been thinking about is like, the natural evolution of a lot of this is similar to Gary V. Like once we spend so much time promoting ourselves and learning this process, then we really are at that point digital marketers, and we really have the knowledge to share with any business that could help them expand their customer base, their opportunities with using digital marketing for sure. So you've got all these wannabe influencers and existing influencers coming to your weekly meeting, and you're seeing some of them grow and some of them struggle, and some of them having some great successes. What is the biggest mistake that you see us as wannabe influencers making, or what is some bad advice that you hear given to people like us quite a bit?
Yeah, I would say the biggest issue I see, especially for even sometimes seasoned influencers can have this, is just the motivation part. So like I've had a couple people reach out to me and be like, hey, can you take a look at, can we do like a quick Zoom call, and can you just like take a look at my YouTube channel or something like that? And I'm like, yeah, sure. So we jump on a Zoom, and the first thing I notice when I'm before the Zoom, I'm looking at stuff, is he hasn't posted anything in 3 months on YouTube. So then just like, I mean, the biggest feedback is just, you have to keep going. You have to keep posting, like you're not going to get an audience from just
Start there, right?
yeah. So like if you're not there, then there's no real experimenting to be had. There's no real improvements to be done. That's probably the biggest issue I see, is people want to grow their influence and want to do these things, but what it requires is taking action and staying consistent and continuing to move forward. And that's definitely the biggest thing. I mean, we all struggle with that. I do too.
Yeah, that's been my advice from day one, or it's what appears to have any success I've had. It appears to be the result of being consistent. Every time that my numbers have dropped, every time that I felt like I'm out there listening to crickets, it's when I haven't been consistent, when I've missed that deadline of submitting. When I consistently post every week, same time, same channel, consistently, then it's an incremental, slowly but surely, it's that steady growth. But if I miss, or if I don't show up, it only takes once of that happening. And when I do, it's like, there they go. They tank. And every time you lose a listener, I wonder if and when you ever get them back.
Yeah, I talked to Justin Shank about that. He was a guest on my podcast and at my meetup. He's got over 2 million downloads on his podcast.
Amazing guy that I, again, hope to emulate and be like someday.
Yeah, he's an awesome guy. And he shared that, you know, there's so many podcasts out there. And, you know, if you miss that, you know, release and someone goes somewhere else and finds that alternative, I mean, they're most likely going to find a podcast better than yours because
right. Because I'm not that good to start with. So
yeah, exactly. Same with me and same with him.
Right.
He's got a super big podcast. So, you know, just you have to be cognizant of that. And if you lose that listener and they find something else to spend their time listening to, you may never get them back. And it's important to stay consistent for that reason, according to him.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Well, speaking of that guy, because he is one that I'm hoping to get on my podcast as well. Who do you think would be a good guest for this podcast?
I mean, so many people. I mean, even in just the meetup group, there's probably so many people.
Just send me your list and I'll go ahead and start marking them off one at a time. Right?
Yeah. Just let me know after and I'll send you a few, but there's so many people. I mean, and you've had so many people that I know. Like I recognize a lot of people that you've had as guests. I mean, even Chris is an amazing guy. You just interviewed him. So
you were the impetus for that because I knew that you had done a podcast with him right before Podfest. And so that was, hey, like if Jeremy can do it, man, I'm going to stick my neck out there and say, nice. Hey, I'm with Jeremy, man. Come on, help me out. But yeah, no, I totally name dropped you and he absolutely remembered you and has plans for you as it come to find out. So
yeah, that was awesome.
Be wary. There's things in the works that you don't even know about.
Yeah, perfect example of how you never know how things can come full circle. But like he's such a big and awesome person, and just that he knows my name is pretty cool. And like now you reached out to him, told him like, you know, some stuff that I'm doing. You were excited about it, brought some sort of energy to him, and then that helps me out. So like that was awesome.
Yeah, well, he has VidFest, you know, he has Podfest, and now he's launched all these little spin-offs of VidFest, and I forget some of the other ones that I'm butchering them, but yeah, a lot of the VidFest stuff is primarily geared towards YouTubing, and he saw what you were doing, so yeah, he's very excited about that. But so that being said, for this show, in an ideal, perfect world, say 5 years from now, who would you like to have as the ideal guest for your show? If you could have anyone access to anyone you wanted.
Trying to think.
He's got a list. He's pulling up his secret list of.
I don't have a secret list. I probably should, but I'd say Marquez Brown from YouTube. Like that would be an awesome guest for me. Like I remember when he started his YouTube channel, just reviewing phones, and now he's interviewing people like Elon Musk and Bill Gates and stuff. So
that's amazing.
He'd be a cool one. That or Michelle Obama. That'd be pretty awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. She'd be amazing. Did you read her latest book?
I didn't. My wife read it.
Yeah, my wife's wrapping it up right now. I'm waiting for her to finish so I can read it.
I heard the ebook for that is pretty good, or the audiobook, because she's
does she do it? Does she do the audio?
So I know people that have read the book and then listened to the audiobook after just to like get her energy.
That would be a very enjoyable experience. I like listening to her talk. All right, so we're going to start wrapping up. I know we've got to get ready. You've got your influencer call that's going to be cranking up here for too much longer. So we want to both have time to get ready for that. But if everything were to go according to plan and all your wildest dreams come true, what does this look like 10 years from now?
I'd love to see just like a giant community of just awesome, authentic, vulnerable people who are making big impacts in whatever they're passionate about, sort of be together and some kind of capacity, whether it's in multiple different like smaller communities that are like their own little pods kind of thing, or like just, you know, some kind of community around all this. So I'm pretty driven to continue the weekly meetups. Of course, if you're listening to this and you're going to grow your influence, I definitely invite you to come to that. And then Nate's been awesome about being consistent with coming and being supportive with me doing that, because it's been a learning experience for me for sure. But 10 years from now, it's way too hard to imagine that far out. I mean, I'm a year and a half into my journey, And it's just, I would have never guessed I'm at where I'm at now. It was a year and a half or 2 years ago.
You and me
So,
both, brother. It's a
yeah.
wild ride, isn't it?
Yeah.
Who would have thought? It's so crazy to think how much different my life looks now than it did 2 years ago. Just from and don't get me wrong. I mean, I had a lot of great stuff going on in my life, and but it looks so much different now. It's so much different. It's really cool.
Sure.
Let's talk about how folks can get on this Thursday weekly call that you have, your influencer meetup call, and how folks can find you specifically on social media and all that good stuff.
So I've got links to everything on my website. It's whyinfluence.com, whyinfluence.com. And I've got a community tab at the top. And on that, it's got like, a way to join the community, as well as it has like my social media links. But it's at whyinfluence everywhere. So it's on Instagram and every social media, it's at whyinfluence. And then LinkedIn is just my name, but you can get the link to that from my website. So whyinfluence.com, and then there's a community tab, and there's links to everything there. The community name might keep changing. Right now I call it the Weekly Influencer Meetup. I've already changed it twice, might change it a couple more times. So the safest way is just to say to go to my podcast website and go to community tab, and everything's there.
And just know Thursdays at 1:00 Eastern time, whatever you're doing, find the time to get on that call. You will not regret it. I can assure you.
Awesome. Thanks, Nate.
That's great. So that's how they can find you, but I always want to make sure I give everybody a chance to plug a charity or organization that they're involved with that's doing any good. Do you have anything like that you want to plug?
Currently, I do not. I used to volunteer at the Tennessee Aquarium. I was volunteer scuba diving there, but since COVID, I stopped. And
that's a bit of a hike for you, going up to Chattanooga.
Yeah, it was like a once-a-month commitment, but it's like a nice adventure because I got to scuba dive there.
Oh, brilliant.
But I don't know. I'm not really involved with too much at the moment. COVID sort of shut me down with a lot of stuff. So
yeah, I do feel like it's worth mentioning that this group that has turned into this virtual meetup, this started off as an in-person meetup downtown, right?
No, yeah, it did.
Because I went down there to go to, I came back from Podfest. I was like, Jeremy's doing this meetup. I'm going to hook up with all these podcasters in Atlanta. We're going to have all this synergy. And then bam, COVID hit. And it was like shut down. And yeah, I actually ended up showing up a week early to that brewery.
Oh, geez.
I was so excited about it.
I was so excited too, because I've hosted several meetups and like nobody really showed up, and maybe I had 1, 2 max. And like after Podfest, I was like, wow, there's like 15, 20 people RSVP'd right now. So I was like excited. I went and bought like some giveaways. I was gonna like give away things, just like make it more legit. And then I've had those boxes sitting in my room for months. And then just like, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, I'm like, I'm never giving these things away. I finally opened them. And so now I've got like this mug and like these things I bought as giveaways as like items for me now. But
well, I'm confident at some point in time in the hopefully near future, we're going to be able to get back to a lot of that. And I'm really looking forward to this group and getting to be a part of this group in person and getting some of that synergy and networking going. It's going to be a great thing. So hang on to those prizes, because I want to be eligible to kind of throw my hat in the ring. Again, the meetups are going to be so critical, and they've already made a big impact on me personally. So I'm grateful for both the virtual and the in-person stuff. It makes a big difference, man. Last 2 questions. One's fun, one's easy. One will make you think a little bit. If you had a billboard for all the world to see, what would you put on it? And then the last question is, what's your favorite item under $100 that you use on an everyday basis that you could not live without?
Good questions. So the first one, I would say, I'd sort of quote a guest that I had. Might be a little too long for Billboard, but we'll see. Is something along the lines of, if you found a message that makes a difference and makes an impact on people, then you're ripping the world off by not going as big as possible, because there's people out there who need to hear your message. And if you don't go big enough, they're not going to hear it. So it'd probably be something along those lines that's aligned with my brand and just helping people, feel obligated that they should be sharing.
I love it.
Under $100, I use daily.
Cheaper the better.
All right, sort of funny story, but I'd say my laptop. my computer that I use for everything.
That's more than $100, man. Well, there better be a good story behind this. What do you got? I'm gonna make you give me another one. Go ahead.
I've got a friend. He was dating this girl, and she is. Without going too deep on that, there's a whole craziness involved with it. But she lives in New York, and so like I went to visit my friends, and we hung out with her, and I had this like junky laptop at the time, and so she was like, "I'm gonna get you a new laptop because get you something better." She actually stole it from her work. Someone that just got fired, she like took their laptop and gave it to me. I was like, "This is like really sketchy. Like, what am I? Like, is this thing being tracked? Like I don't feel comfortable with this." But like, she just like forced me to take it. So then I guess I formatted it. Like, I can't just like give it back to the company at this point because then she's gonna get fired. So so I use my laptop every day. It's what I use for everything.
And in that case, it was under $100, right?
It was under $100. Yeah.
Fair enough, man. I'll take it. That'll work. All right, cool. That's amazing. What a great story. That's awesome. That's a great note to end on. Fantastic. Jeremy, thanks, brother. Really do appreciate it. And for those of you who haven't checked out the Why Influence podcast, please go there. And if you want, even if you're not trying to be a social media influencer, which most of us are not, but there's just a tremendous amount of knowledge to be gained. This digital world that we're living in. It's a whole, for me, it's outside my comfort zone. I struggle to understand it, make sense of it all, but it is our reality. And the better that we can take advantage of that, particularly as a small business owner, the more success we're going to see. And Jeremy's a great resource to learn all of these principles, that this is legitimate networking. This is legitimate growing your business professionally. So it's a great resource. So Jeremy, thank you for your time. Thanks for what you're doing. Thank you for that weekly call. It's huge. It's made a tremendous impact on my life.
Well, thanks for that feedback. It means a lot to me. It means a lot that you're there, and definitely look forward to our continued relationship as we both keep going down this journey.
Yeah, man, you better stay my friend because I have so many big things I want us to do together. So we spent the first 30, 45 minutes before this call discussing a lot of our dreams and visions and things that we hope to do. And again, to see someone so aligned with that, with my vision, and to see someone on the same page and thinking the way I think, it's very reassuring to me to think that maybe I am on the right track. So
you are on the right track. Just keep it up. You're doing great.
You too, brother. You too, man. And big things to come. And I guess we'll see you here in a little bit on that Thursday call.
Sounds great. See you then.
All right. Take care, Jeremy. This episode is brought to you by Atlantic Custom Group. For all your home repair and improvement needs, Atlantic Custom Group specializes in the unique and inspiring. From custom libraries and millwork to tree houses and off-grid structures, Atlantic Custom Group can do it all. Renovate your kitchen, remodel your basement, or reinvent your entire home with Atlantic Custom Group. Call now for an appointment, 770-827-7591. Atlantic Custom Group is the official sponsor for the Extraordinary Podcast. So you're still here. Wow. Thanks for sticking around. So, what'd you think? What did I miss? What would you like to know more about? Who would you like to hear on the show? If you stuck around this long, maybe you won't mind giving me some feedback. And don't forget to check out the website, extraordinarypodcast.net, for all the latest episodes. And if you enjoyed the show, please take the time to share with your friends, on social media, or with anyone you think who might enjoy it. And last but not least, if you're ready to start living an extraordinary life, check out 8keystogreat.com, where you can craft your free blueprint to renovate your career, home, or lifestyle. The program is free, but you have to do the work to unlock each key. And finally, if you'd like to speak with me directly, you can book a free 30-minute Zoom call directly through my Calendly link on the contacts page. And in the meantime, check out some of the other exciting interviews with ordinary people living extraordinary lives. Thanks for listening, thanks for sharing, and most of all, thanks for just being you. I'm Nate G, and we'll see you next week.